Hello, good evening. Welcome to the first of these shows in 2019. A very happy new year to you. Some weeks ago, very unusually for me, I had a little bit of foresight and I decided how could we kick off the new year, and I thought it would be a talking shop about both the two Sheffield football clubs, taking stock, and indeed between making that decision and now plenty has happened at Bramall Lane and Hillsborough. So I'm delighted to welcome back James Shield of the Sheffield Star, the Blades writer, and Dom Howson, who's probably the most capped player in this studio as far as appearances are concerned, Sheffield Wednesday writer for the Sheffield Star. And to kick it off, you know, it's great to be able to say that on both sides of the city, it's a pretty optimistic outlook, isn't it? Which didn't look, Dom, likely at one stage.
No, it didn't, but it does look as if now that there's a bit of a feel-good factor that's starting to come back at Hillsborough. It's never dull, but I think the last few weeks, and particularly the appointment of Steve Bruce, I think it's a shrewd one. You know, only time's going to tell, but I think that it's going to be an interesting couple of months for Wednesday. I think that clearly promotion has got to be off the table. They've got to be realistic, but I think it's all about building towards next year, you know, and I think hopefully they can have a good cup run. Yeah.
As well, that has become suddenly a really big game, isn't it? That replay at Luton. It's next Tuesday for the right to visit Stamford Bridge, James, which is a certain interest of yours when you're not covering Sheffield United.
We've been joking about this in the office today, but possibly nothing that we could discuss here.
I don't see why.
But no, it's. Do you know what? Actually, joking aside, I mean, just move it on a little bit. Couldn't have come at a worse time. Luton Town's manager going, could it, for them?
Yeah, it couldn't come at a worse and a good time for Wednesday.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, I mean, normally a change of manager is the last thing you want when you're about to face a club. But if that club's doing well, as Luton have been, then change of manager. Mick Harford, I think, is in caretaker charge there for the first game.
Knows Luton inside out, doesn't he, Mick?
Oh, yeah. I
don't know if he's still got his restaurant there. He used to have a restaurant.
Did he?
In Luton, yeah.
Hard as nails, that fella.
But there was no arguing about the bill in there, was there?
I wouldn't have thought so. Look, I'm going to pin you down later. I'm going to come back to Chelsea a bit later, because it's no secret, really, is it? Where your
it's not now.
allegiance.
It's not now.
Come on, everybody that knows you, just as they know Dom's other allegiance as well. Thanks to this show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to Now let's go back to the Isles of Blades. You'll have had a peep over the fence, won't you, at events at Hillsborough?
How can you not when you live in a city like this? How can you not?
So what do you make of it then?
No, I think, you know, as Dom said, I think on the face of it, it looks like a good appointment. I mean, I think the job's got its challenges, as I think clearly, you know, the job at Bramall Lane has got its challenges, and you know, they're probably a little bit more acute maybe at Hillsborough at the minute. If they weren't, the job wouldn't have become available, would it? No. But no, I mean, listen, it's. I think the nice thing is, if you take the broad perspective, you've got two managers now in charge who both know the game inside out, who you would both back to do a good job. And I mean, if Sheffield United, obviously fingers crossed that they actually get over the line this year. But if they don't, I think the beautiful thing is you look at the way, you know, the two guys that will potentially be in charge next season, because you never know. I mean, God, managers can spend 3 weeks in a job now, can't they, before they're given the boot. But you would look at it and think, do you know what? Actually, this could be a year where both clubs are pushing. Yeah. And some of the best times I've had in this city covering Sheffield United are when they've been going head to head with Sheffield Wednesday, because it just brings such a buzz to the city. And I think it's something I've said on here before. I think both clubs feed off each other more than either of them would care to admit as well.
You're going back to that League One season where Sheffield Wednesday pit United for promotion really to the last time. They were kind of neck and neck in that sort of rivalry. And it would appear to be coming back. I don't know, Dom, how conscious people at Hillsborough in the inner sanctum are of this Sheffield United supremacy, which it is at the moment.
Oh, they're well aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they'd like to change, turn it around. But I think I wrote with the last derby that there's no doubt about it that United have gone past Wednesday in everything that they've done over the last 18 months to 2 years, and full credit to Chris Wilder and the job that he's done there. It's been magnificent, and they've got a great chance of getting promoted, and I think that there are actually lessons for Wednesday to learn from what United have done when it comes to recruitment, style of play, and building for the future. United have got a winning formula.
And it's manager-led recruitment. I think for me, that's the big lesson. Chris Wilder can manage like an old-fashioned manager. It shouldn't be old-fashioned.
But Sheffield United also have a great recruitment team as well in place, which needs to be said, and they've seen the benefits of that over the last few years.
I think the important thing, when I've done a piece for the paper tomorrow, I think you're exactly right, but it's with Martin Craney, who I know is a player who's on the sort of the periphery of the starting 11 at the minute. But it's an experienced footballer. He knows what it takes to win a promotion. He's clearly done it before with a club that you know well.
Very well.
And he was talking. It was interesting because he was talking about the importance of having an identity, and that identity being a sort of a tactical template. You know how this team plays, and that will be different across the division. But that's the one thing that Sheffield United, I think, that has enabled them to
nail down
to overtake Sheffield Wednesday quite rapid, in a very short space of time as well. I think is having that identity, and anybody who's watched Sheffield United play, say on the television, they might not know who the manager is, they might not know who all the players are, but they'll probably be able to tell you this is how that team goes about its business. And I think if you look at all of the successful clubs across all 4 divisions, and probably going into non-league as well, they've all got an identity, very different ones, but you all know what they stand for.
And Wednesday haven't really had that for a while, have they?
Yeah, they've lost it since Carlos Carvalho really left, and Jos Lukai, it was muddled from team selection to tactics, and that you look back on it more, the 11-month reign of Jos Lukai, and it has actually set Wednesday, I think, further back. And this is why it's such a big job that Steve Bruce is picking up. He's really picking up the pieces of, they've still got a bloated, expensively assembled team, and of course financial fair play to bear in mind, and which is going to become more and more prevalent over the coming weeks and months. There's a lot of things that need fixing at Wednesday.
Setting back under Jos Lukai, I agree. Where the set forward, he may have set things forward in one respect with so many young players, many of whom actually show themselves well. If those players blossom in the future, and to Sheffield Wednesday's benefit, either in their team or through sale value, then that will be a legacy that will redeem, I think, Jos Lukai's reign.
I agree with you that I think that's when we look back on Jos Lukai, that was the big positive. It was the huge plus that he was prepared to give youth a chances. We haven't seen that in a long time at Wednesday, and they haven't, compared to the neighbours down the road, they've not produced anywhere near as many players as what Sheffield United have done over the last 15 to 20 years. And so Jos Lukai was pretty principled, and he was trying to go about things in the right way. I liked it, but at the same time, Wednesday are a team who've spent big money and they expect results. They want success. And
he was looking to the future, forgot about the now. I think
which is exactly what I said.
A summary
in a piece
on his reign. Obviously, we're going to talk about Gary Madine in a moment from both of your perspectives. You'll be surprised to know. We'll also talk about the transfer window and the remaining prospects for that for Sheffield United and for Wednesday, which is perhaps more interesting, really, because we know that Steve Bruce in the background, though he doesn't start until February the 1st, will have a close involvement on that. But just before, I picked up yesterday on a really interesting survey study in the Yorkshire Post, I think it was, where they'd done a study on the value, I know this is subjective, of all the squads in the Championship, i.e. if those players were on the market and were sold. And I thought it had the ring of truth for me in many areas, and it had Sheffield Wednesday at 10th in terms of the value of the players they got, which is about where I think you and I have discussed where we think that capability of the squad is, and Sheffield United at 15th. value, an estimated value of 38 million or thereabout, which again underlines the job that's being done there, doesn't it? Actually third in the table.
Well, I think that's one of the impressive things. And again, it's not aren't United doing great and aren't Wednesday struggling at the minute. I genuinely don't mean it like this when I say this. But the big difference that you've seen at Bramall Lane as compared to Hillsborough, and it's not always been this way, but it's from the boot room into the dressing room. There's absolute clarity. There's no confusion about what is going on, how we're going to play, probably who is going to play as well, because it is quite a small squad. You know, there's very little deadwood, if any, in there. Possibly the only deadwood that's there at the minute now is already out on loan.
Yeah.
So there is that absolute clarity and sort of strategy there. The interesting thing about that, and I saw it as well, I just wonder if, and I mean this in a positive way actually, I just wonder if that was being a little bit generous perhaps to Sheffield United, because I'm thinking, you know, if you look at some of the players who have come in there.
I reckon 30 million.
Yeah, well, do you know what? I just wonder, because I think you can argue, I agree with it in one sense.
Yeah.
When you look at, you know, the outlay in terms of wages and some of the transfer fees that, you know, a lot of the other clubs towards the top end of that division have spent.
Yeah.
I think there's no comparison, but I do think it's interesting to wonder what, say, 250,000 initial fee for Jack O'Connell, John Fleck on a free now, soon to be, you would imagine, an international player in terms of getting his first senior cap. Ender Stevens on a free. Established international footballer now.
Yeah.
You wonder what those would actually be worth if they go onto the open market, because you've seen, you know, with some of the ridiculous fees that,
which tend to go for the strikers. But I do take your point. You know, value for money. In some cases, no money at all.
That's been one of the great things they have done there with the recruitment, is the value for money that they've delivered as well. Because when you look at whatever you argue about that piece of research, and I'm not knocking it in any way, shape or form, but if you look at the value, if you took, I'd be fascinated to see value when signed or transfer fee compared to value now.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering whether it includes loan players and how you can include loan players. For instance, Derby have got some real quality loan players, you know, and that's inflating what they would be doing if they didn't have them. Gary Madine, okay, right, we've got 7 minutes to the break. We are going to talk about the window generally, the fixtures this weekend. Steve Agnew, I know that you've been talking to at Hillsborough, a really personable character. Right, you know, of all transfers, the one that's most well, obviously when Ched Evans was signed by Sheffield United for varying reasons, there was a reaction. I'm guessing more of a reaction here because United are third in the table. It's all serene, and yeah, it's not, to put too fine a point on it, it is a controversial signing of a former Sheffield Wednesday striker. Your thoughts on it? I'll tell you what, Dom, your thoughts on it first of all.
I don't think we've got long enough in the first half to go through.
Go on, 6 minutes.
I think it could be an inspired signing for United, and when you look at Chris Wilder's track record, it's hard really to argue with him that he's seen something in Gary Madine. He's played well against United for Bolton only last year.
Twice?
Yeah, in both games. Yeah. And you look at it and think that he offers something different to what United have got. And looking from the outside in, to me, it looks like it's an upgrade on Leon Clark, who hasn't performed to the level that he did last season. It was always going to be very difficult for him to do that and replicate the form that he produced last year when he bagged nearly 20 goals. But I think that, you know, Chris Wilder's clearly looked at it and gone, it's a calculated risk, and there is a risk element to it because he hasn't played masses of football. So trying to actually get him up to speed is going to be the immediate task. So it might be that he's used off the bench initially and then build up his minutes, but I think with the physicality and what he brings in the air, I think it could be a good signing. You do look at it and think in the Championship, he's not exactly set the league ever away. Bolton, he did well last season in a struggling team, but he still only managed just over double-figure goals. So I think anybody who believes that he's going to come in and fire United to promotion on his own single-handedly. That's not going to happen.
That's not the intention.
But no, it isn't. But it could be a good foil for Billy Sharp, who we know is just a natural goal scorer and top drawer at this level.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, and again, you know, pat on the back actually to the coaching staff for this. I would be amazed if at any point in his career Gary had ever played in a team that creates quite as many chances as this Sheffield United team do. Because if there is a criticism that you can label at them, is that they, you know, despite scoring 3 goals in their, you know, each of their last sort of 2 league games.
3, I think.
In each of they still do not convert anywhere near probably the volume of chances that they should do. No, I mean, listen, I must admit I laughed when I sort of first found out about the interest, because without boring you what goes on behind the scenes in my family, I've been boring the pants off them for about a year now, saying that Gary Madine would be absolutely perfect in a footballing sense for that Sheffield United team. So
it's your fault, is it?
No, I've nowhere near that amount of influence. But and you know what? I suspect if the staff up there at Bramall Lane had heard me say that, they'd probably have shied well away from me. But you know, so in a footballing sense, absolutely agree. And I think the other thing that you've got to look at as well is you've got to pair very often, and you see this in different players' careers, you've got to pair the player with the manager as well, and take that as a package. And I think Gary's clearly done very well, despite the fact he's not scored the goals that they would have wanted, but he contributed to that promotion last season. When you speak to Neil Warnock about him, you know, even off the record, and I think, you know, certainly Alan and I know Neil well enough for him to be quite open and honest off the record. Yes. Couldn't speak highly enough of him and what he brought to the team.
That's always telling, isn't it? When you hear it off the record, it's far more telling than when you hear it.
Yeah, and he's, you know, I think Chris is the right type of manager to keep, and let's be right, Gary on the straight and narrow, to keep him focused.
The dressing room will.
Yeah, you've just actually the words out of my mouth. The other thing is he's stepping into a very, very strong dressing room with not 1 or 2, but 6 or 7 very, very strong characters in there who have all, so we're told, quite happily accepted him in and will keep him on the straight and narrow. It reminds me an awful lot. And listen, Gary, with all due respect to James Howson, is a better player technically than James is. But it reminds me an awful lot of that signing when they brought, you know, James in during the second half of that League One promotion-winning campaign, and you look at the impact that he made. But I do get, listen, he comes with baggage, and we'll get onto this later, I'm sure.
The debatable point was not so much, it isn't a debatable point about is he the right player to come in to give Sheffield United something different. The only debatable area is the public relations risk, you know, at a time of great harmony.
Yeah.
And that will only be decided by what happens.
Well, I think it is a risk. It is a gamble. It's clearly a gamble that Chris Wilder and his staff feel is, you know, it's a calculated gamble and it's one worth taking. What I will say is, I think the one thing in Sheffield United's favour with this is that they've clearly got a manager in charge at the minute who has got the trust of the fans. Yeah. So I think that will prevent this from becoming ridiculous. There will be some who don't like it, and I absolutely get and understand the reasons why they don't when you look at some of his off-the-pitch sort of indiscretions, and that is absolutely their right, and they're justified in feeling like that. Yeah. I think what I will say is, though, if you look again at the bigger picture and you look at the market and the tools that Sheffield United have got, both financially and in terms of fees and wages at the minute, and that's not a criticism of anybody, that's just dealing with reality and what is there. I'm not so sure managers, unless somebody's done something ridiculous, in this day and age, especially managers who are fighting for promotion or battling against relegation, really have the luxury anymore of taking a moral stance on things like this, because I can imagine.
He served time, we move on.
Exactly.
Everybody deserves a second chance. So do you, by the way. It's 15 seconds to the break. Bringing you back for part two.
I'll leave it there.
James Shield and Dom Howson, and there will be more conversation about Gary Madine. I mean, is he going to be on the bench on Saturday for starters? The transfer window at both Hillsborough and Bramall Lane, and James Gregg will be here as well to round up everything else. See you in 5.